The November 9 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Scott, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zhang?
Here.
Mr. Pons?
Here.
Mayor Freiling?
Here.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Here.
Mr. Ramsey?
Here.
We have before us the council minutes from the October 9 and October 12, 2017 meetings. Any questions, additions?
I had a quick question for October 12th. After closed session, didn't we vote on an item authorizing the city manager to execute the EDA? Does that need to be put into the minutes? Including the minutes? The attorney or?
It should be, yes.
Okay. It's not there right now, so.
Including in the motion perhaps to add the action from October 12th after coming out of closed session.
Right. Okay. I just noticed that.
I'd like to make a motion.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes, including the vote that we had on October 12th after the closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Scott?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Ramsey?
Aye.
We have a couple of matters of special privilege today. The first of which is recognizing Mr. Phil Serra. Phil Serra has served the city of Williamsburg and all its residents remarkably well for the past 35 years. Phil, you and your team have safeguarded the public's trust in its local government through careful stewardship of the financial resources which the public has entrusted to the city's care. From the very start, Phil sought to earn the Government Finance Officers Associations, or GFOA, certificates for the budget and the CAFR, or CAFR. It is no coincidence, then, that for the past 31 consecutive years, the city has earned national recognition with the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Not just good, not just great, but excellence. And for the past 25 consecutive years, the city has earned recognition for the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Now, Phil, you may be the only person in this room who gets excited about this. Here for you today, we have the 1994 edition of the Governmental Accounting, Auditing, and Financial Reporting, or GAAFR, better known as the Blue Book, that has been signed by all city employees and all members of council. This public finance classic is a publication of the Government Finance Officers Association, again that was GFOA, and it is considered the most comprehensive guidance available for governmental accountants and auditors. Phil has used this book as a roadmap or trusted guide over these 35 years, and especially so when he was studying for the certification exams to become a Certified Public Finance Officer, or CPFO. Phil, I think you may now have surpassed even Peter Wallentysh in your use of acronyms, another stunning accomplishment. Thank you, Phil, for your distinguished, dare I say, excellent service, and for your phenomenal stewardship of the city's finances these past 35 years.
I'll just say a few words. It's been a long time, 35 years. I want to thank Ray Adams, former finance director. Ray was a person that hired me 35 years ago. He actually interviewed me right in the old Stryker building on a Saturday night in 1982, along with Colonel Johnston. Some of you remember him. I never thought I'd stay 35 years. It was not my intention, but as we all find out when we get here, it's a hard place to leave. It's a very awesome place to work. Most important, being part of a really good team for a very long time has been the biggest thing that's kept me here. Thank you all.
Another presentation to make. Officer Holliday, would you join me, please? So on behalf of my fellow City Council members and the entire City of Williamsburg, it is indeed a pleasure to recognize Boy Scout Troop 103 for their long-standing and faithful support of National Night Out in the Williamsburg. The city would like to express appreciation to Troop 103 and the adult leaders who provided support for the National Night Out year after year. Their dedication to this event is demonstrated through showing up early for setup, staying through the event to assist the vendors, and not leaving until after cleanup is completed. The friendly and hardworking demeanor the Boy Scouts display is impressive, and it positively impacts all of the visitors, volunteers, and event committee members. Thank you, Michelle. These young men represent our community well, and it's a comfort to know that they will be our future leaders. Boy Scout Troop 103, please accept this plaque as a token of appreciation from the City of Williamsburg and the Williamsburg Police Department for assisting in making National Night Out a tremendous success. So we call this section of the meeting Matters of Special Privilege, and I'm going to take one more. Sorry, Mr. Collins, for not letting you in on that. I just want to make note that the City of Williamsburg was selected one of the top 10, or one of the top digital cities in the United States by the Center for Digital Government, which announced the winners of its 2017 Digital City Survey. Williamsburg, Virginia, placed 5th in the United States of populations less than 75,000, with our population of 15,200. The annual survey recognizes leading examples of cities using technology to improve services and boost efficiencies. This 2017 survey focused on collaboration among cities, counties, and regions with targeted questions on the initiatives cities were proudest of in the areas of citizen engagement, policy, operations, and technology. Many factors play into the judging process, including an increased focus on open government, transparency, open data, and access to information. So I'd just like to take a moment to congratulate all the city staff really play a role in this, but particularly our expansive IT department, which includes Mark Barham, Michelle Wilson, and Emmanuel Watkins. Thank you very much, Mark, to you and your team for putting Williamsburg on the map in this regard. And this is the 5th consecutive year that Williamsburg has been recognized. Thank you very much. All right, this takes us to our public hearings. The first one today is General Obligation Public Improvements and Refunding Bonds, Series 2017 Proposed Resolution 17-22. Mr. Sanderson, will you be leading this off?
Yes, sir. Up on the... IT is not what I'm good at. We've got a brief presentation for you that we'll walk through, but just while that's coming up, I'll give you a sense of the timing. Since our last meeting, we've set up our meetings with the rating agencies. We actually met with them via conference call yesterday. City manager and your finance director did a great job on behalf of the city, really putting your best foot forward. So we've had those calls. We expect to hear back from them next week. Again, certainly the expectation is that we're going to maintain the ratings that we have, which are very good. With S&P, we're AAA rated, and with Moody's, we are the one notch below that at AA1, which is a very good standing. So we expect our ratings back the 16th, assuming obviously council considers it favorably today. We would accept those ratings and mail a preliminary official statement on November 17th, and we would price the transaction on November 28th and close on December 7th. We've updated the numbers for you as well to give you a sense of the market. And this has changed a little bit here recently since the House tax bill has been proposed. And it's going to at least make us think a little bit more about one of the things we're going to talk about later is the refunding component that I've suggested we look at. But rates have dropped considerably in the last 4 or 5 business days. Whether that stays the same, we'll see. It's a combination of probably the expectation that corporate tax rates might go down, as well as the expectation that there might be fewer tax-exempt bonds in the market, so people are really coming in and buying them now. All of that's good for you. But these numbers that you have here don't take that into account because, frankly, it could go away tomorrow, depending upon what the Senate bill looks like, which I believe came out today. I've not had a chance to look at that. So all of those things, one, put us in a position that I'm very glad we started the process and we're going to come to the market earlier than a lot of people that are going to try to come into the market in December. If the House and Senate bills move forward, I think this is going to be more like 1986 was, which was before I was practicing, but I understand was a very difficult time, and lots of people try to do transactions then. So all of that is to say, I want to show you 2 things that for your consideration. You will have a public hearing in a minute, but the first is with respect to the new money. We've assumed $13 million project fund. Here is the debt service. I want to point out to you the interest cost that we have on this on the bottom left. The true interest cost is just shy of 3%. When you add in all of the cost of issuance of the transaction, it's just north of 3%. This is a 25-year amortization of your loan. Again, we set it up so that you don't repay principal until after your debt service drops. In 2021 is where it drops, so we started the principal amortization there. The next scenario is assuming a 20-year amortization. So you're paying it off faster. Your interest rate is a little bit lower. You'll see here the TIC is 2.73. When you throw in all of the costs, you're at 2.86%. Your annual payment is higher, but because again you're paying your principal off faster. But the overall debt service difference is $1.6 million. So if you pay it off faster, you're paying ultimately $1.6 million less in debt service. I'd suggest that given the credit quality of Williamsburg, it's pretty common for highly rated localities to pay off their debt in 20 years. There's certainly nothing wrong with doing it in 25 years, but to the extent that the cash flow would work for you, our recommendation would be that you move forward with a 20-year amortization. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was while we're in the market, I went back and looked at whether there are any opportunities to refund and simply lower some of your debt service. You've got 2 transactions that are outstanding. The first is up top, the 2010 bonds, which were public bonds. They are callable out in 2020 and have various interest rates that you see there in the second column there. But in the bottom is the 2013 deal we did, which was a bank loan. The interest rate on that's 2.6%. And so on the left, you'll see where the interest rates are in that range from 2018 to 2028. The coupon is less important than the yield that you'll see there. And so the object here would be simply, can we substitute lower rates for higher rates? And we would only move forward with this transaction if it made economic sense. Part of the tax bill that was put forward also eliminates the ability to do an advance refunding, which you can do now currently one time in the lifetime of a bond, but the tax bill as written would eliminate that. That top transaction, if that component were to stay in the tax bill, would be eliminated. We wouldn't be able to refund those bonds until 2020. So the recommendation would be even more so to look at that transaction and include that refunding at the same time that you sell the new money bonds. And here I'll show you the savings that you would get from that transaction. This is just the refunding. We again substitute the new debt for the old, and really the savings that you see there on the left-hand side total $448,000. The fact that we get most of those in year one is predominantly because of the difference in the payment dates of the transaction. And then we leveled them out after that, so that the savings on an annual basis after that would be about $30,000 a year. As a percentage, and you may have recalled us talking about this before, when we look at a refunding, we try to save at least 3%. And here we're north of that, 3.44%. And one of the things that I suggested to the manager and the finance director would be, even if we didn't save 3% on this transaction, given the fact that the tax bill would preclude us from doing a large part of this refunding, our recommendation would be, even if that number were to come down, you move forward with the transaction anyway. You're already in the market. Any savings that you can get would be better than nothing, because you wouldn't be able to refund those bonds until 2020 anyway. So that would be our recommendation. The resolution that you have in front of you would delegate the authority to the manager and the finance director to make that decision at the time of the pricing. So, Mr. Mayor, that's the extent of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, though.
No questions? Makes
So,
sense.
when you talk, just tell me what refunding means versus refinancing. And
Same thing, different words, same thing. Ultimately, it's just taking a 5% interest rate and substituting it for a 4% interest rate.
It still pays off the debt in the same period of time, so you're not extending out paying more debt. You're
That's
still
correct.
paying it off in that same maturity date.
Yeah, like sometimes if you refinance your mortgage, you'll be in year 20, but you'll refinance with a 30-year mortgage. This doesn't do that. This is a 10-year mortgage, and you're refinancing it with a 10-year mortgage.
thank you.
Can you help me make sure I understand this correctly? You're advocating case 2, which is the 20-year financing over the 30, which would save us about 1.6 million total over the life of the bond,
Yes, sir.
and it would cost us approximately $130,000 more per year for those 20 years.
That's correct.
Just on a cash flow standpoint.
On a
It doesn't
cash flow.
really cost us more, it's just, that's the cash flow impact.
That's correct.
But if we do this refunding, then we would be saving an additional total $400,000.
That's correct.
We would have a better cash flow by at least $30,000 a year for the majority of those years. So we're dropping that cash flow difference. We're not really dropping it, because we could still refund on either case, but then we're looking at a $100,000 impact for a total savings of $2 million for both of these combined, and that's less than the cost of 1 cent on the real estate tax. To me, the community, I think, would completely understand and be behind whatever we needed to do to make that work.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh, not the community part, that's not your call.
First part, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a net savings, ultimately, and
Right.
refinancing, or refunding some old debt at a better rate, and then we know we need to move forward with new debt for future purposes, and so it makes sense to do it all now. Future holds. These are pretty good terms, I think.
Yeah, again, we
Pretty good
talked about the date that we will know exactly what the rates are, although we'll have a pretty good gauge of it as we're leading up to it, is the sale date of November 28th. And on that date, the rates are locked in, and these are locked in for the life of the loan. They never change unless you were to ever lower them. So that's a good thing. There's no reset. There's no put. They're locked for the life of the loan.
And we need to make that call on which scenario today.
I think it would be helpful to get that input from you at least. Yes, sir.
Can I also just make one clarification for the public that may be tuning in, that this borrowing is for public safety facilities. It's for the replacement of the fire station and the renovation in addition to the police station. So this is for modernizing our police and fire stations. That's the purpose of this borrowing.
Questions, discussion?
Just makes sense that we do this sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody who'd like to come before council and speak on this, please do so. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, come back to council for additional thoughts.
No, it seems like the right time and to do it, and it's a testament to Finance Department and the city that we're able to do this, and that we have the credit ratings to move forward.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a good time.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I will. I move the city council approve.
In that motion, do you want to include which?
Should I note the 20-year and bond refunding? I thought this was drafted so that you all had the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, it says here, in refunding the certain,
But it's not the 20 versus 25. Do we need to specify that?
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin White, who is with Kaufman & Knowles, is your bond counsel. He drafted the resolution, so.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm Kevin White with Kaufman & Knowles, we're bond counsel for the city. Drafted the resolution, as Jimmy said. It gives the flexibility to the city manager and the finance director to decide really which option. I think that your recommendations are helpful. I don't think it needs to be in the resolution.
Okay, thank you.
But it is clear we prefer 20 years.
20 years.
And
Yes.
Correct.
Case 2 with
Correct.
the refunding.
The flexibility, my understanding of the flexibility would be that if the bond rates went up, and we still needed to achieve this project, I'd reach out to council and just inform you that as the rates went up, the 25 years still allows us within our debt service range to do the project and get your feedback at that point, but with all understanding of moving forward on 20.
Yeah, and the purpose of the delegation to the city manager and the director of finance is because they'll be attuned to this every day through the sale date. So if market conditions change, that can be changed.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
all right, I move that city council approve resolution 17-22 to authorize the issuance and sale of public improvement and refunding bonds, Series 2017, for the purpose of financing renovations to the city's police and fire stations and refunding of certain of the city's outstanding bonds.
Second.
Ms. Scott?
Mr. Zane?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
The second public hearing today is the Jewish Student Center, and Aaron Burke is going to make this presentation. At this point, I just want to acknowledge that since my spouse is an employee of the College of William and Mary, and this is a request by the William and Mary Real Estate Foundation, I will be abstaining from conversation and voting on this matter.
I will be doing the same. Paul and I share that spousal feature with the college.
Not the same spouse.
Not the same.
Ms. Burke.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. The William and Mary Real Estate Foundation is requesting a special use permit for a 3,200 square foot building that will house the Shankman Jewish Center on 2 lots located at 406 Jamestown Road. The center will include a kosher kitchen, meeting room, dining hall, study space, offices, and a rear patio. The properties are currently owned by the College of William and Mary and will be given to the William and Mary Real Estate Foundation. The applicant intends to extinguish the interior lot line to accommodate the new structure. They note that the center is intended to provide a home to the hundreds of Jewish students that attend the university. The space provided will serve the university students as a gathering spot to serve kosher food, observe holidays, as well as a social center for students to meet and relax. The applicant's statement has been included in your packages. The Site Plan Review Committee met at their August 16th meeting and recommended approval of the site plan with the note that stormwater details would need to be finalized. The site is located in the AP1 Architectural Preservation District. The ARB approved conceptual plans at their September 26th meeting. The applicant will have to return to ARB for final approval to include final material and color selections, as well as additional details discussed at that meeting. The site currently consists of 2 parcels, and the total combined area is 11,325 square feet. The applicant proposes extinguishing that interior lot line to create 1 larger lot to accommodate 3 on-site parking spaces as shown in this site plan. The zoning ordinance requires 1 space for every 10 seats of maximum seating capacity and in the main place of assembly, which equates to 6 parking spaces being required for this project. Because the Student Center is located across from the campus and adjacent to a bus stop located at the intersection of Cary Street and Jamestown Road, staff supports the reduction in the number of parking spaces from 6 to 3. The applicant is requesting a modification of the 10-foot rear property line landscaping requirement and the 15-foot public street right-of-way landscaping requirement along Carey Street in order to accommodate the 3 on-site parking spaces. A 4-foot fence is proposed along the rear property line to mitigate the loss of landscaping for the driveway and the 1 parking space. The handicap parking space adjacent to Carey Street encroaches 12 feet into the required 15-foot landscape buffer from Carey Street for the length of the parking space, which is approximately 18 feet. The applicant will provide landscaping along this parking space to screen the space from Carey Street. There was not a quorum present at the Planning Commission members eligible to vote on a recommendation at the October meeting. Because of a time constraint outlined in my memo, this application was moved forward without recommendation from Planning Commission. Therefore, staff recommends to City Council to approve the special use permit to allow the Shankman Jewish Center to locate at 406 and 410 Jamestown Road with the 2 conditions that I noted in my memo. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant's representative, Vernon Getty, is also here for questions.
I don't have any questions. The only thing was, even though Planning Commission wasn't able to vote on this as a quorum, there were some comments made by the Planning Commission, which I think voiced their support for
That
the
is
center
correct.
as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your presentation, Aaron. Just kind of wanted to probe a little bit further into staff's analysis in terms of parking, because I know for residents of Cary, Griffin, obviously Ms. Ramsey lives there, and within the 2 neighborhoods there's always been that concern about parking. So kind of flesh out a little bit more for me. Were there any parking concerns you think that might arise from this, or?
The applicant and staff discussed that very early on in this project,
Sure.
and it was noted that because of the adjacency to campus and the intention to serve the students on campus, that most of the traffic they would be receiving would be walk-up traffic. There are parking spaces available on campus within a very quick walk of this location. The parking spaces that are on site are 3. There's 1 handicap space, a space that's intended for the rabbi who would usually be at the center, and an additional space possibly for guest speakers or other individuals that might be present. There's also a bus stop very close to this at the corner of Carey and Jamestown Road. So the understanding that staff had and the applicant's intention was that most of the students that would be arriving at the center would be walking there.
And just to add on to that, it is decal parking on Carey Street, correct?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if someone who didn't live there parked on the street, then they would be subject to a ticket.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's complemented with the police department's increased efforts for enforcement on that, I recognize. So just to be absolutely clear, there doesn't seem to be a conflict with that decal parking, that the number of spaces for residential parking along that part of the neighborhood currently with this proposal?
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all for me so far.
With the parking, there's not an existing driveway at this parking entrance. So providing this entrance would take up a space off of Carey Street, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Other questions?
With that, I'll open the public hearing and invite Mr. Getty up first, and I do have a speaker's card, and I'll get to that next.
Mr. Acting Mayor, the council,
I got the launch codes in my precinct.
I'm Vernon Getty, and it's a privilege to be here representing the William and Mary Real Estate Foundation. Also here are Sam Jones and Nancy Buchanan. This is an application for a much-needed and long overdue Jewish community center, and the center is being made possible by an extraordinarily generous gift from Mr. Mark Schenkman. William and Mary is and long has been fully committed to being a diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community, and is very excited to be able to provide this facility for its Jewish students. It will provide a home to the hundreds of Jewish students attending the university. It will be a Hillel institution, which is a Jewish student organization with a mission of developing future leaders and leadership skills. The organization has been present at William and Mary for many years and is present on some 550 campuses nationwide. The one question and reaction we get when discussing the center is surprise that there isn't already a Jewish center at William and Mary. One of the first questions the folks in the admissions department get from Jewish prospective students and their family is there a Jewish center? And with this facility, it'll be nice to be able to say, yes, there is, and it's right down Jamestown Road, 2 blocks from here in the admissions department. This will be a walk-up facility. Aaron has covered that very well. The initial plans for this, when the foundation and college were first looking at it, had parking in the back left corner of the project on the assumption there was an alley extended from Griffin Avenue to Cary Street. And in the process of looking at this, we realized that that alley along the back of this property was abandoned by City Council in 1952. That was no longer a feasible way of entering or parking the site. And had that alley been there, it would have exited onto Cary Street, resulting in the loss of 1 parking space. I think this has no adverse effects on the neighbors or community, and it's a wonderful addition to the entire Williamsburg community. So we would ask for your support. Thank you very much. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Getty.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Getty.
I have one question.
Councilman Zhang does have a question.
Sorry. I get discounted sometimes. Just quick follow-up in terms of parking, and
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure, given this project and moving forward along the houses on Jamestown Road, I don't know what the college intends on, but there's seemingly a lot of precedent that might be set based on how this project goes, it's particularly parking issues, or maybe just addressing that aspect. When there are bigger, like alumni weekends, homecoming, bigger events occurring at that center, has the applicant found a way to address maybe the increased flow of potential traffic to that particular site? Or I know it doesn't happen often, but those big events, they will find places to park.
Right.
College has pretty restrictive decal parking.
Well, I think the type of events you're thinking of are like homecoming weekend, where certainly my experience
Parents' weekend.
They very much relax their enforcement of parking for those weekends, and people park on campus.
Okay, gotcha. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Getty. I have one speaker's card, Ms. Fairbanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Sabrina Fairbanks. I live at 119 Berkeley Lane, and I am a property owner and landlord on Cary Street, and I'm a William & Mary alum. So I feel like I can look at this from different angles. As you know from my emails that I've sent, I'm more concerned about the driveway coming from the proposed center rather than the structure itself. As this council knows, and previous council members, we've been working on Cary Street parking and the general yellow decal streets, Griffin, for well over 5 years now. And as many of you probably know, if you've driven through, it's used as a shortcut as a cut through from Jamestown Road to South Henry Street. There is lots of traffic. There's umpteen programs at the Methodist Church that start early in the morning and go till late at night. And so there's just lots and lots of cars. Parking has been an issue for residents. The street is predominantly rental properties now, and we could have 60-plus renters, plus their guests on Cary Street. So we were very fortunate that the city and Mr. Clayton carved out that 100 block of Cary Street for residents. And this, to say that there wouldn't be an adverse effect, I think is incorrect. One drive, what you're saying, you're taking away one parking space. that's not really how it works. When you have a parking space, there's others, they don't park as close to. So I believe that you're going to take away more than one parking space, and the city has already allotted William and Mary's Human Resource Building 3 spaces right in front. So there's just a few parking spaces left for over 60 residents and their guests. So it is an adverse effect to take away the residential parking, the taxpayers' parking for this center. I'm not sure what can be done in terms of the entrances. There's an entrance at Griffin, there's an entrance on Wythe Lane, and the college already owns 3 out of 5 of those parcels. So it seems to me that their employees would have access through those driveways rather than having to put a driveway on Cary Street. And, many of the other buildings have put their access on Jamestown Road where there is no parking anymore, so there wouldn't be an adverse effects to your citizens. So I'm opposed to the driveway on Cary Street, but I would also like to just highlight that while this structure is going to be possibly a prototype or a model of what we citizens call Jamestown Row, the structures that the college owns, I think that it's also important to look at this from how is this going to set a precedent for parking all along Jamestown Row when those white houses are demolished and there's new buildings there. What is the college going to do about parking for its students, its employees, its visitors? And so I think this is a larger issue than just a driveway on Cary Street, and I feel badly that you're being asked to make this decision without a parking study that included the residential neighborhoods, and you don't have any information or a report from the Planning Commission. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Fairbanks. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for further questions, discussions.
No further questions. I just think that this is a gift from Mr. Schenkman, not only to the William and Mary community, but also to the city of Williamsburg. And I think that we're very fortunate to have Mr. Schenkman want to invest money in the project and to provide a place for Jewish students to meet, to gather, and particularly for their holiday meals. I had a trainer at the rec center who was Jewish, and every holiday he was sort of scrambling to try and find a family to go celebrate with because there wasn't a place for them to gather. So I think about Rory when I think of this and all the other Jewish students that go back, 50 years is how long I've been knowing different alums. So I think it's very, very helpful to the community. I'd also like to thank the ARB for their collaboration with the architect that on the center and coming up with something that I believe will be more aesthetically pleasing to everyone in the community and addressing people's concerns for that. So I'm all in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Zhang?
Yeah, thank you. Just generally, to start with, I think this is a great proposal. Moving forward, I think it will be great for the city and for the college. And as the applicant's lawyer, Mr. Geddes, mentioned, it's something needed for a long, long time. And I know a lot of my friends, alums, city residents who would really see this as a welcoming part to advancing the city's mission for being a more inclusive community. And it's also nice, I think, to mention that the Real Estate Foundation took this on as an application. I hadn't realized that the college had also just owned the property, and they could have just easily done anything. And I do appreciate the fact that the Real Estate Foundation chose to bring an SUP application in front of council so we can have this community discussion and conversation. Also, just in terms of design, I'm very appreciative of the applicant for taking up the ARB suggestion. I see the chair, Mr. Toby Lane, here today from the ARB, and very appreciative. Again, I think the design meshes well, especially the exterior and the front with the Methodist Church right across the street, but also just the two sides, I think, complement the neighborhoods as well. So thank you for taking up that suggestion. I do have a little bit of a concern with parking. And I think, generally when I'm thinking about just the bigger events like Alumni Weekend, Parents Weekend, Homecoming, that's usually a challenge that we citywide have to face. It's not just one peculiar neighborhood we have to focus on, and I'm very cognizant of that. Some aspects, I think, will have to be addressed in a separate conversation as well with regards to the wider theme of parking as well. But I guess I just wanted to ask Ms. Ramsey, based on your many years of living in Cary and Griffin, do you think that this will have as much of an effect as such, or do you think this is just going to be another part of?
Well, I do recognize that there's a whole lot more traffic going down Griffin Avenue and Cary as a cut through.
Yeah.
I cut through Cary a lot of times because
Right.
it's sort of a shortcut, but I live on Griffin.
Yeah.
All the other people who cut through on Griffin to get over to South Henry Street, I think, do so because they want to avoid College Corner. And as far as parking, you look at what the college did with one house on Jamestown Road, and they created a parking lot there.
Mm-hmm.
So they did add a few parking spaces there. And but back to Griffin and Cary, yes, it's crowded. I own a rental house on Griffin, and I put in an extra driveway to be sure that I could provide off-street parking for my tenants. But not every place has that opportunity to do so.
Right.
So.
And I think this proposal is just a little bit different too, because they do provide parking spaces. They listen to staff to reduce from 6 to 3. I think that's a much more measurable improvement than when I think they have with their human resources building. I don't think there's any parking spaces around. They have to have a partnership with the United Methodist Church. So I think that's a step up. But I do want to get on the record and articulate that concern that moving forward, especially with Jamestown Road, hopefully we both can find a more mindful solution for on-campus, not on-campus, sorry, just parking in general, because parking constraints are real there. Even along the parking down along the college pass into James, what dorm is that? Landrum Drive. Those parking spaces are even pretty narrow sometimes, and even as a student, I can attest that my experience, it was hard to find parking there too. So just want to get down the record, but I'm supportive of this project, and I'm happy to vote yes on it.
Maybe we just all need to encourage a little bit more pedestrian and bike riding so that we don't have as many cars on the streets.
That's right.
Aaron, I do have a question, if you please. With regard to parking, obviously it is a concern. If this were a single-family dwelling, would that dwelling have access to parking from Cary Street as well?
I believe if it was a single-family dwelling, they would have the opportunity to do that, but they could also count parking adjacent on the street. Is that correct?
They would be required to have 2 off-street parking spaces on site if
Right.
it was a single-family dwelling.
And I think that's important, because it's not this entity that's causing a problem.
Right.
I think whatever goes here in the future would have some effect on parking with an entrance there. So, I agree with my colleagues on council. I think, what better use of property near the college than to offer a place for people to worship and gather and have a sense of community. And if we can't offer that in the city, then I think we've got other challenges. So is there a motion?
Let me get the number here. Sorry. So I move that City Council approve the special use permit and parking reduction from 6 to 3 spaces to allow the Schenkman Jewish Center to locate at 406 410 Jamestown Road with the 2 conditions recommended by staff.
Seconded.
Ms. Scott, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Abstain.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Pons.
You're welcome.
This takes us to our next public hearing, small cell wireless facilities. Ms. Murphy?
I'm going to handle this report if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Back in the summer, I presented to Council the legislative update and mentioned briefly the requirement that we will have to allow small cell facilities in the city's zoning ordinance, and what you have before you is the ordinance that does that. So effectively, the ordinance makes the co-location of small cell facilities a use by right in all of the city's zoning districts. A small cell facility is a structure that's about the size of a dorm room refrigerator, along with the attachments that go with that, in addition to the dorm room refrigerator. That can be located on a structure that can either be a building or a utility pole on private property. This code requires that this be a use by right. However, it does allow the city to, where there is a historic district, historic element, basically our architectural review districts, AP and CP district, to include additional regulations for that. And so what you also have in front of you are new ARB guidelines that we're asking council to adopt to deal with how small cell facilities are located within the AP and CP districts. And I'm going to defer to Carolyn to talk about those guidelines if you have any questions about them. The ordinance allows for an administrative review by staff of these applications, and so we have provided that process in the ordinance. The review process has to be completed within 60 days, and there are limited reasons why the city is permitted to deny the facilities that are requested: conflict with existing or planned communication facilities for public safety, other public safety needs, aesthetic impact on publicly owned or controlled property, but not on privately owned structures, except in the AP and CP districts where we are allowed to consider aesthetics. We're allowed to adopt reasonable rules for abandoned support structures, and so that is also contained in the ordinance. The ordinance also provides for public rights of way. The bill requires the city provide an application process for right-of-way permits, again, to co-locate on existing structures within city rights of way. So basically, we're talking about power poles or light fixtures. Again, there is an application process provided for in the statute that is in the ordinance. The maximum fee allowed is $250, and so that's also addressed in the city ordinance. The application process for that is also 60 days and can be extended for an additional 30 days by the city. There is also a provision in the ordinance for micro-facilities. Micro-facilities are small facilities that are located on power lines between two power poles. Those are permitted by right without a right-of-way permit unless certain conditions are determined by the staff to be applicable. So, for example, it would require closing a lane of traffic, disturbance of the pavement, placement on a limited access right-of-way, or there are other precautions that are necessary to protect the traveling public. In those instances, we can require a right-of-way permit for that. This doesn't address what the statute calls wireless support structures. So these are poles and other structures that are built from the ground up to support cellular facilities. Those are treated as they are right now in the zoning ordinance and would require a franchise to be located in the city right away. The statute doesn't change that this year. That is not necessarily going to be true next year, because I understand that they're looking at this issue again for the next General Assembly session. What you have in front of you today deals primarily with small cell facilities being co-located on existing structures, and the city is required to allow those, and so that is what the ordinance in front of you does. It is required by the state code now, so effectively council has to approve something with this ordinance, but this is what the staff is in front of you, and we would request that council adopt proposed ordinance 1719 and proposed ordinance 1720 to comply with the state code and also to adopt design review guidelines.
Questions from Ms. Shelton?
Although this is complicated, it is a lot better than it could have been in its first iteration.
Yes.
We're just talking about the providers of the service. putting these in. This is not something that an entrepreneur can start locating around the city.
Well, it's a combination between the property owner and the cellular provider. So if someone is providing cellular booster service, which is what these generally are, they have to have an agreement with the property owner in order to do that. So those are the two entities that are involved.
Even if it's in the public right-of-way?
If it's in the public right-of-way, they have to provide evidence that they have the permission of the property owner being the owner of the pole or the other structure. So in the public right-of-ways, that's largely going to be Dominion Power.
What happens if power lines are put underground?
They have, well, so these are not going to go on lines except for the
With the
micro
little micro
facilities.
ones.
The micro facilities only work on lines. So if the lines go underground, those facilities go away.
And if they would put one on a line and then the city would put wiring underground, we wouldn't have any liability?
They would need to, not under this ordinance, they would need to switch to a small cell facility on some other structure, or the micro facilities.
I had a quick question for Drew. Has the Virginia Municipal League reported back to the locality memberships about the ongoing meetings they've had with the industry throughout the summer? Because I know they've had a series of meetings from the Senate side, chaired with Senator McDougal. Any sway of where it might be headed? I know we are going to consider this for our legislative agenda, but any updates on that?
I've not personally heard anything. I know that Ms. Shelton sometimes talks with the VML staff as well, but I know that the VML right now has not said that they are forecasting that the industry will come back and try and amend the bill, but they did alert us that it's certainly a possibility given the posture of the industry at the end of the last session.
Gotcha.
Staff will check with VML and provide an update to council.
I think it's like what the Vice Mayor said, much better than the first iteration of what could have done. There's some land use controls with this, as opposed to last time, from what I understand.
At least in the Architectural Review District and the Corridor Protection District.
Right.
We don't have a lot of choice here, do we?
No.
So, I have a question, though. The cell service provider needs to negotiate with the property owner to have access to their property.
That's right.
And the city has nothing to do with that
That's
conversation. It's independent and by property. So there's not much of a threat of, that might not be the right word. You don't have to worry as much about infringement in, for example, the Colonial Williamsburg historic area, because Colonial Williamsburg owns a fair amount of the property, and it's unlikely they would agree to that. But what about the public right-of-way? What would stop a service provider from working with Dominion and putting cell service facilities on light poles up and down the Duke of Gloucester? And there's nothing the city could do about that.
Well, they can't put up, poles are not permitted, all right?
No, but there are existing poles in the public right-of-way.
So in the AP and the CP district, the small cell, in the historic area proper, there is no small cell facility permitted under the Architectural Review Guidelines. Outside of that, it's the control of the Architectural Review Board, where they go and what they look like. It is certainly possible that a small cell facility provider can work with Dominion in other locations in the city where there are poles and put up these facilities pursuant to the right-of-way permit here. What they're not going to be able to do is put up their own poles in city rights-of-way where poles don't currently exist.
But the ARB guidelines would keep them from putting these facilities on, or whatever you call them, these pieces of equipment on existing light poles in the public right-of-way in the historic area.
In the historic area proper, Carolyn's going to have to weigh in on the Architectural Review Guidelines.
Well, the Architectural Review Board regulates basically the private property. Zoning doesn't really cover the city right-of-way, but in the private property part, as you can see in the guidelines, it prohibits the exterior location of the facilities. So.
Right, but I'm not worried about the private property there. It's whatever.
We're going to use the Architectural Review Guidelines as the basis
the guiding principle
right,
there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody who'd like to address council on this matter, please come forward. Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. Come back to council.
These are two separate ordinances, like two separate motions?
Yes, well, you can do it in one motion. The first ordinance is the one that adopts the language in the text of the city code. The second is the architectural review guidelines.
I move City Council approve proposed ordinance 17-19 and 17-20.
Second.
Ms. Scott?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Takes us to the next public hearing, High Street interior lot line extinguishment. Ms. Murphy.
Mayor Fryling and members of council, this is an application to extinguish the interior lot lines for the remaining 37 undeveloped residential townhouse lots in High Street as shown in blue on this screen. This area is bounded by Traben Drive to the west, Sterling Manor Drive to the north, Middle Street to the east, and Kings Manor Drive on the south. High Street is designated as economic development land use in the 2013 comp plan, and these properties are zoned ED2 Economic Development District. High Street was rezoned in 2005 from ED to ED2, and a site plan was approved by Planning Commission for retail, restaurant, theater, and 574 residential units. Sterling Manor Apartments was constructed in 2007 and contains 191 apartment units. A subdivision plat was approved and recorded in 2007 for 53 townhouse lots. Since that time, 16 townhouse lots were constructed and are being rented. This year, High Street was sold to 3 separate entities. The commercial portion was sold in August to High Street Shops, LLC, Sterling Manor Apartments, which contains the 191 units, and the 16 constructed townhouse lots was sold to CCC Sterling Manor DE LLC in September, with the remaining undeveloped lots, including the 37 townhouse lots and 150 and 152 Kings Manor Drive, was sold to HS Apartment Land LC in July. The owner is seeking approval to extinguish the interior lot lines to develop the townhouse lots to create 4 new lots for a new apartment development. Planning Commission held a public hearing in October. No one spoke at the hearing, and Planning Commission recommends to City Council by a vote of 5-0 approval of the preliminary plat as shown in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant, Mr. Steve Middleton, is also here if you have any questions of him.
Questions for Ms. Murphy?
No questions.
Carolyn, thank you. This doesn't change any of the other ordinance, height, density, or anything of that
That's
nature?
correct. This is just extinguishing the interior lot lines. He's looking to do 2-story apartment buildings on these lots.
Carolyn, thank you. No questions.
And Ms. Murphy, if this happens and when the owner gets around to actually undertaking this project, ARB oversight?
There's no ARB approval in this section. It's only the retail portion of High Street that's in the district.
Okay. With that, we'll open the public hearing. If anybody would like to address council. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, come back to council for discussion.
Good explanation, Ms. Murphy. No questions. Glad High Street's kicking again.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. I had another word, vitality and energy, but I think people have recognized that there's a lot more going on in High Street, just evidenced by the events that took place this weekend. I think having apartments there and bringing more people can only expand the economic impact and the energy of the whole location. So glad to see it move forward.
Glad it's kicking.
Happy to vote for this.
Mr. Mayor, I move City Council approve the preliminary plat as recommended by Planning Commission.
Seconded.
Ms. Scott?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Takes us to our next public hearing. That would be James York Plaza LLC and James York Self-Storage LLC easement and partial release of existing easement. Mr. Small.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, James York Plaza Shopping Center on Merrimack Trail in York County began development in the early 60s and is served by the city's water system. More recently, the self-storage business located behind the shopping center expanded and required an extension of that water system to provide fire protection. This extension required an easement be granted to the city from the adjacent shopping center owners. And in the course of their research, these owners requested that the city vacate an easement that was originally granted in 1962, but was no longer needed, and they requested this in order to provide a cleaner title to the property. The draft deed granting the new easement and vacating the unnecessary one is included in your packets. As described in the memo, also, a public hearing is required by the Code of Virginia before council can authorize vacation of the unneeded easement. Be happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Seems
Mr.
pretty
Small,
straightforward.
who on the city side or city staff verified the lack of need of the additional easement?
What we did is it's an area of the easement where we go out and say, is there any water within this, any water lines within that easement? And at this point, there's no purpose for that.
So there are no
property.
water lines now, and if they needed to be put in, then the easement would need to be added back.
Right, they would grant that
Okay.
if it was ever needed.
With that, we'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody who'd like to speak on this issue to come forward. Drawing much of a crowd today. We'll close the public hearing, come back to council for consideration or a motion.
The City Council authorize the city manager to execute the deed of easement and amendment dated September 1, 2017 between James York Plaza LLC, James York Self-Storage LLC, and the City of Williamsburg.
Second.
Ms. Scott?
Mr. Zane?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
This takes us to our reports, monthly financial statement. Mr. Sarah?
Mayor Fryling and members of council, you have before you the October financial statements. Just as a reminder, the numbers still are not compared completely the same. They're not apples to apples at this point because of the new financial system. And as I said before, you will get the report in January with the December numbers that will have completely comparable numbers so you can see what's actually going on. Good news is a meal tax is picked up for September. We had the highest September meal tax city's ever had. So that kind of the trend we experienced in August of being very low, we still don't know what that was, but it did reverse for September, and we're optimistic that October will continue. So, other than that, there's nothing special to report.
Mr. Sarah, there's not a chance that there was some carryover issue there between August and September? We're pretty confident that...
We look exactly at the cards that the restaurants and hotels send us every month. Plug those in the database, and you're seeing the raw data here exactly for the time frame the activity occurred. So yeah, in this, everyone did pay up for September on the meal tax side, so that's another reason it's probably really high.
Great. Yep. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Monthly departmental operating reports. Mr. Collins, anything you'd like to highlight?
We'll highlight a couple since it's really the first full month of the new operating system. I looked at the city manager's operating report and looked at two items under that. One was under economic development. I think the graphic representation, it's real easy to see that the city has netted 17 new businesses from this point last year to the current year. So it's 17 business. So even if businesses left or went out of business, that the idea that there's some high vacancy rate, well, actually there's 17 new businesses in the city that weren't here at this point last year. The other thing that stuck out to me is under human resources, and that's a stabilization of our turnover rate. After several years of, especially coming out of the recession, a lot of job markets improving and people retiring with better markets, you have a lot of volatility in your turnover rate. And some of that may go to council's policy and budgeting of the compensation classification study, encouraging that. And as we know, we're still going to have significant turnover just from generational change within our workforce. But it was good to see that for the calendar year 2017, since council really took on the compensation part, that's stabilized across a lot of our departments. So two things that I noticed in the operating report that are just graphically visual, and you can see them when you go and look at the graphs, which is different than looking at the old table format with a lot of numbers. It just pops right out at you.
Questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Collins. Takes us to city manager reports. First is legislative agenda for the 2018 General Assembly Resolution 17-23.
No change from the presentation to council last month and at the work session on Monday by the Assistant City Manager. Mr. Trivett's here if you have any questions. The City Attorney and I are also here. If not, there's a resolution for your consideration.
Questions or comments?
No questions, comments?
Mr. Trivett, thank you for all your effort in this regard.
I move that City Council accept and discuss the proposed 2018 legislative agenda.
Second.
Wait a second. City Council approve Resolution 17-23, a resolution supporting certain local and state legislative priorities.
Seconded.
Ms. Scott?
Mr. Zane?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Frawley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Second city manager report is FY19, FY20 transportation funding applications, resolutions 17-18, 17-19, and 17-20. Mr. Small.
Mayors and members of council, for your consideration today are three resolutions for transportation project funding. If you would recall, Virginia has changed their main method of funding transportation projects into more of a objective-based formula known as Smart Scale. In order to spread the workload created by this intensive evaluation of that program and work required to evaluate the other funding programs, VDOT has changed to a two-year cycle, a two-year application cycle for Smart Scale, where Smart Scale occurs in the even years and the other funding programs occur in the odd years. Being an odd year, the three programs we intend to apply for are the Revenue Sharing Program, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program. Applications will be evaluated over the next few months and will be presented to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in May or June of 2018, with funds becoming available in FY19 or FY20. The first application is a request for revenue sharing funds for the Capitol Landing Road Corridor Project. The revenue sharing program requires a 50% local match, and the city has long used this program for many projects, including the Ironbound Road and Long Hill Road intersection project that is currently under construction. For FY18, the Commonwealth Transportation Board approved a state match of just over $102 million for 77 projects throughout the Commonwealth, which was substantially less than the $172 million a year prior. Of the $102 million awarded for FY18, $46 million was awarded to 5 localities for 12 projects. To be able to fund more projects with the reduced funding, the CTB recently revised the program guidelines to reduce the maximum request from $10 million per locality to $5 million per locality per year. They have also instituted a $10 million maximum state contribution per project lifetime credit, or lifetime limit. This will provide a much greater chance for smaller localities like the city to be awarded projects. The Capitol Landing Road Corridor Project provides for a complete streetscape redesign starting at the Colonial Parkway in the south up to Merrimack Trail. The new project will replace the curb and gutter and entrances, remove the existing sidewalks, and replace them with wide pedestrian and business-friendly sidewalks with landscaping, furnishings, and bus shelters. It'll also install new street lighting, place all overhead wiring underground, and resurface the street. Funds have already been allocated for this project, with $3 million available in the FY20 CIP funds that were shifted from Monticello Avenue, and $1,988,871 in surplus federal urban allocation funds that were transferred from completed projects. The budget for this project is now estimated at $6,360,000 due to the additional federal requirements and schedule, and so the project budget falls about $1,371,000 short. Revenue sharing funds would be able to make up for that shortfall, and the 50% local match is covered, is included already in the $3 million CIP funds already budgeted. So no additional local funds would be required. The second application is for Federal Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, also known as HSIP. And this is to install flashing yellow arrow indicators for 12 of the 17 traffic signals in the city. The remaining 5 signals are not suitable for the flashing yellow arrow signals. The FYA signals provide for a more intuitive left turning motion than the currently used yield on green ball indicators, and many studies have shown that a safer roadway system results from their use. To prepare the application, an analysis was performed using crash data at the 12 intersections over a 3-year period. The cost of the 23 accidents attributed to left turns is estimated at $1.2 million and becomes a benefit mitigated by the flashing yellow arrows. The cost for the flashing yellow project is $243,000, giving it a cost-benefit ratio of 5.1. In past years, the HSIP program funded projects with cost-benefit ratios of just over 2, so there's a very good chance the application will succeed. Although HSIP is technically a 90% federal funding project, VDOT picks up the required 10% match, so no local funds would be required for this project. The third application is for the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program. This 80-20 federal program was previously known as the Transportation Enhancement, or also known as the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, used for non-highway projects such as sidewalks, bike trails, scenic overlooks, transit shelters, and railway station renovations. This program is also the funding source for the Monticello Avenue multi-use trail awarded last year. The proposed project is for a sidewalk or trail along Francis Street between Nassau Street at the Art Museums and South England Street adjacent to the Powder Magazine. The project is listed in the FY20 CIP along the same route to replace the existing gravel path. This route is also along the preferred route of a proposed extension to the Capitol Trail, currently known as the Birthplace of America Trail. That trail will eventually run from Jamestown and through Williamsburg and Yorktown before terminating at Fort Monroe in Hampton. As a result, the sidewalk proposed in the CIP will be considered for conversion under this project to a multi-use trail after we have additional discussions with stakeholders, particularly the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. The TAP, or the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program, is highly competitive, with only $21.9 million awarded statewide in fiscal year 18 for 70 different projects. To improve the application scoring, we have proposed increasing the match from 20% to 30%, or $90,000 of the proposed $298,250 budget. The path, if approved for funding, would connect 2 key destination locations of the expanded art museums and the Market Square area of Colonial Williamsburg and provide for one of those initial links in the Birthplace of America Trail. In your packets are 3 separate resolutions supporting these applications, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have about the proposed projects.
No questions, Aaron. Just thank you for continuing to pursue state and federal dollars to get our local objectives done. It makes everything go much smoother when the money does come. So,
I just wanted to thank you also, and I did have a couple questions, and since this one's up here, I'll sort of work backwards. So this area that between Nassau and the Powder Magazine, that's the only area on Francis Street without a sidewalk, is that correct?
We do have some other areas that may have only a sidewalk on one side, but I believe this might be the only area that doesn't have it at all.
Okay. And then on the flashing yellow light, you were saying that I guess studies have been done of accidents on the left turning green, but has there been anything on the flashing yellow, or it hasn't been out there, I guess, long enough?
Has been proven to be much safer.
Okay.
And it really comes down to the intuitiveness of when a driver comes up and they see something yellow and flashing, it registers immediately to yield.
And
yellow means yield.
And caution.
But when you see a green ball, you go. If greens mean go. And so that's really the basics, what it comes down to. And it does make it a lot safer.
Where it can be more confusing is when you have a straight through lane and a turn lane,
Right.
and you're required to have two light fixtures, which puts two green balls up there, so people think one is for each lane, and that's not the
That's
case.
true. And then on the first one with Capitol Landing Road, since the majority of, or a large percentage of the funds have already been allocated by the city, how does that improve our chances of getting the VDOT funds?
Well, I don't know if the scoring mechanism for revenue sharing is not as objective as some of the others. Like the HSIP has actually a cost-benefit ratio tied with it, and so does Smart Scale. Revenue sharing, not so much. However, our request is in a reasonable below the $5 million cap per year.
Thank you.
No other question, but I will say I'm always impressed that there's this money available, and thank you for trying to stay on top of it all. I hope you're staying on top of it all and bringing every opportunity to us, but thank you very much.
I just wanted to clarify, and thank you for your presentation. In terms of the VDOT, the state funding, I understand that we're coming up to another session where the governor has to introduce another 2-year budget. So this is just coming from the existing one. It's not going to be affected at all by, the application's not going to be affected at all by the new budget incoming from session, right?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. All right. We'll just assume that's going to be. Okay. Cool. That's all.
And, it's one thing to have the money available, it's another thing to have it accessible. So thanks for your effort here, Mr. Small. Can you talk to me a little bit about the third project, 17-20? There's a sentence in here that talks about sorry, I had it here a second ago. It talks about basically converting, or here it is. As a result, the sidewalk will be considered for conversion to a multi-use trail after further discussion with stakeholders. You mean the sidewalk would be considered for conversion to a multi-use trail before it was constructed?
So initially, what's in our CIP right now is a standard 5-foot concrete sidewalk. And what's happened since the initial conversation about just needing a sidewalk between England and Nassau is the Birthplace of America Trail, the extension of the Capitol Trail through Williamsburg. And so there still needs to be conversation about, is this the alignment of that, or does it go down Henry Street? Even if the alignment of Birthplace of America Trail goes a different route, is there interest in by Colonial Williamsburg to connect the lodge to that so that bikers will have a bike route to the historic inns and lodge? So that conversation still needs to happen. At a minimum, you have an improved sidewalk connection in this location. At a maximum, it could be part of that formal trail.
So my question was, as a result, the sidewalk will be considered for conversion. Are we talking about converting the construction parameters, or building a sidewalk and then converting it to a multi-use trail?
No, you just build one of them.
So we consider redesigning the project to become a multi-use.
We would be converting our current CIP concept from a sidewalk to a
I just want to make sure we aren't building something, tearing it out, and then putting in something
Oh, no,
else.
we try not to do that at all
Thank you.
costs.
Other comments, questions? Motion?
Move City Council approve Resolution 17-18, 17-19, and 17-20.
Second.
Scott?
Mr. Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Fryling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
This takes us to the city attorney report.
Is there one more?
I think you missed
Oh,
city
did I?
manager.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Participation on the Peninsula Airport Commission.
Thank you, sir.
Resolution 17-21.
On September 28th, Mayor Fryling received a letter from Chairman George Wallace from the Newport News Williamsburg International Airport Commission inviting the city of Williamsburg to participate in the Peninsula Airport Commission and avail itself of its state code allowed joining of that commission. To do so, the council has to adopt a resolution identifying that it so chooses to avail itself of that authority. After adopting the resolution also includes the appointment of Councilwoman Ramsey to the Airport Commission. At that point, the decision goes to the Airport Commission and the cities of Newport News and the City of Hampton councils to decide on whether or not additional members can be added. So it's still subject to 3 additional approvals after this. As discussed with council, both York County and James City County Board of Supervisors have also adopted like resolutions and appointments. And so we would be the third and final jurisdiction with authority to join Hampton and Newport News on that airport commission. If you have any additional questions, either I or the city attorney would be happy to answer them.
So even if we adopt this today, that doesn't guarantee a spot on the Airport Commission.
Correct. It still requires the action of 3 separate entities.
Yeah. And I think it's worth saying the airport has had its share of tough times lately. They have new leadership now. We need the airport to be strong and successful for economic purposes. We need it to support our tourism businesses. We need it for the convenience and quality of life for our residents. And this seems like a very good time for the city to get behind the airport, to support it, to help it get everything off on a proper foot. So I do hope that the City of Hampton, the City of Newport News, and the Airport Commission, the entities have to approve this, will favorably consider this for the city, for James City County, and for York County. Do I have a motion?
Adopt resolution 17-21.
Seconded.
Ms. Scott?
Mr. Zhang.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Fryling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Now we're at the City Attorney Report. Ms. Shelton?
Nothing else today.
Unfinished business? New business? This takes us to open forum. Anybody who'd like to address council, please come forward, state your name and address. Mr. Shelley. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm here today seeking a response to issues of which I've spoken about many times, most recently in January of 2016. The issues are what involvement, if any, the city had with the voter registrar during the student voting controversy, and what involvement, if any, the city had concerning the lawsuit involving student Serena Lamy et al. And the voter registrar at that time. Immediately after the conclusion of my appearance in open forum in January of 2016, Mayor Hallman followed up by asking our city attorney questions regarding who appoints the registrar, and most importantly, what is the relationship between the city council and the voter registrar? Ms. Shelton responded that the registrar is appointed by the electoral board, and the city council has no control over the registrar, and that the registrar does not answer to the city council, but to the electoral board. These answers provide clarity that there is to be no connection between the council and the voter registrar, but they do not address the specific concerns at which I would appreciate a response. We know that historically, students have been allowed to register to vote in Williamsburg. We know that overnight in 2004, shortly after 3 students announced their intention to run as candidates in the city council election, every student application to register to vote was denied. Regarding the lawsuit brought by the students, we know that the city was legally obligated to pay for the legal defense of the registrar. We know that the legal expense was significant, approximately $75,000. We know from the students involved in the lawsuit that the city upheld its duty to have no involvement with them or their legal team. But we do not know if the city had any involvement with either the registrar or his legal defense. So why are these issues important? Hopefully, such a question is so obvious that it needn't even be asked. Students are an integral part of the community. The right to vote is fundamental and has since been upheld by the Virginia State Board of Elections. Opposition to the right to vote is tantamount to telling them that they are not welcome as members of our neighborhoods or the community and not deserving of a voice in how our city governs itself. This is who we were just a decade ago. Please respond to my two very specific concerns. One, what involvement, if any, did the city or any of its officials have with the voter registrar in 2004 at the time that the students had their right to register to vote taken from them? And two, what involvement, if any, did the city or any of its officials have with either party in the Alami versus voter registrar Andrews lawsuit? Please answer completely and thoroughly. I do not expect a response here today. To ensure that there is no misunderstanding, I will email you these concerns, and I anxiously await the response. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley, and I appreciate your offer to email the questions. That would be most helpful.
Certainly.
Anybody else? That takes us to the end of our open forum.
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Scott?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
We are adjourned.